We're going to discuss Amir Lakum. The funny thing about Amir Lakum is that it tends to always come up when situation is somewhere between desperate and very desperate, and therefore it pays to have an idea going into things of what is okay and what's not okay, because you don't always get to ask Shas, mice at the moment of the issue. So the first thing is that Amir La'akum, the Isser to ask a non-Jew to do a melacha, is, according to most poskim and the way we accept it, is a Isser D'Rabbanan, which is going to be very relevant to a lot of the leniencies that we are going to use in this halacha, because the fact that it's only an Isser D'Rabbanan will allow us to take certain leniencies that we would not have been able to do in the case of a Isser D'Oraisa. So that is the halachic consensus. It's an Isser D'Rabbanan, and we will treat it as such. In so much as that it's an Isser D'Rabbanan, so there is a machlokes as to why the rabbis made the Isser. There are three different approaches as to why the rabbis made this Isser. And in the end, we're going to end up holding like all three. So it's not as critical to know the reasons, because when everything's said and done, we're going to follow all three reasons anyways. But there will be other leniencies down the road that will come into play, because they will only be a problem according to some of the reasons, not all of the reasons. And therefore, although we're going to effectively accept all three reasons as the halacha, but there will be cases where there will be leniencies that will be a result of them not being a violation of all three reasons. So there is a purpose to understand the different reasons, because there are some tangential practical differences as a result. Okay, so reason number one that is given for the prohibition to ask a non-Jew to do a malacha. Imagine the scenario where you would be allowed to ask non-Jews to do malacha. So effectively, Shabbos in a community that had non-Jewish help available, Shabbos would effectively be totally different than the Shabbos that we know of, because you could effectively do every single thing you'd want to have done, just have it done by a guy. So Chazal saw this as a potential issue, namely, if we allow a Jew to ask a non-Jew to do a malacha, Shabbos environment, Shabbos as we know it, is over. We are going through the three reasons why the rabbis instituted the Isser D'Rabbanan of Amir La'akum, asking a non-Jew to do malacha. And we started the first one, which is that Shabbos would be destroyed for us. We would be in an environment where we could have our non-Jewish helper cook for us, turn on our lights for us, and clean for us. Essentially, Shabbos wouldn't be Shabbos. But it's not just that. There was a concern that once Shabbos isn't Shabbos around us, we would then come to violate Shabbos as well. In other words, if we lived in a house in which our non-Jewish help was cooking for us and turning the lights on and doing other malacha, we would lose a sense of Shabbos, and we would come to potentially violate Shabbos as well. Yeah.
How could non-Jewish help cook for us?
You're talking as far as Bishul Akum. Those things that it wouldn't be a problem with Bishul Akum. Make a cup of tea, for example, to cook water. Yeah, I mean, that's a separate issue that we'll talk in other regards, but yeah.
In theory, you could turn your oven on before Shabbos. You can light the flame.
Yeah, okay. Other things also, theoretically, but just as an example, Shabbos would be kaput, and therefore the rabbi said, we don't want you to ask a non-Jew to do malacha, because the next step is the Jew doing malacha. Okay, so that's going to be reason number one. We'll call this the most severe fear, which would be that allowing us to ask non-Jews to do malacha would effectively be creating an environment where our own Shmira Shabbos would be compromised. Okay, that's number one. Number two, in the Navi, Yeshaya describes many of the things that we relate to in Shabbos is from the parak in Yeshaya that has a couple of psukim that deal with Shmira Shabbos. So one of these is V'daber Daver, which we learn the entire command against how we speak and how we conduct ourselves on Shabbos. So whenever we talk about that is a Shabbos-dik way of acting, or you walk calmly, you don't run, or you don't talk about certain things that are not Shabbos-dik, that all comes from this parak and Navi, and these are, that in its own right has the status of the Rabbanan halacha. To ask a non-Jew to do malacha on Shabbos would be the classic violation of this concept of controlling your speech on Shabbos. What could be more of a non-Shabbos-dik way of speech than asking a non-Jew to do malacha on Shabbos? So according to this approach, it's not that we're concerned of the outcome. If the non-Jew starts doing malacha for us, then our Shabbos will be compromised, and we might end up coming to do malacha. No, it's nothing to do with that. The mere statement of please do malacha on my behalf, that in its own right is a violation of proper Shabbos speech. Okay, so that would be your second reason to prohibit asking a non-Jew to do malacha on Shabbos. The third concern is the most technical of the three, and it works basically like this. We are familiar that there's a concept of agency in Judaism, meaning a person can make someone else their shliach to do various things. So, for example, if I wanted to take truma on my field and I wasn't available, present to do it, I could ask another Jew to take the truma on my behalf, and that would work. Okay, that's just an example of shlichus that exists. We have this all over the place. In halacha, if I ask a Jew to do a isser on my behalf, then there is no shlichus. Meaning that if I would ask someone to steal on my behalf, I'm not the thief, the shliach is the thief. So when it comes to doing a mitzvah, there are certain cases where I can appoint someone and then that person becomes a representative of me. When it comes to Aveira, so it just doesn't work. When I ask someone to be my agent to do a sin, the agency doesn't work. He's not my agent. He's his own agent, and I'm not the sinner. He's the sinner. Okay, that's how it normally works. There's one or two exceptions, but it's not relevant to the general idea here. The rabbis then said, since on a Torah level, you can make a shliach to do a mitzvah, and although I cannot make a shliach to do an aveira, the rabbi said when it came to Shabbos, if you would ask a non-Jew to do malacha for you, so rabbinically, that non-Jew would become your agent and it would be as if you did the malacha. So according to this, it's not that the speech is the issue. That's the second reason. It's not that you'll come to do a malacha on Shabbos once the non-Jews are doing malacha on your behalf. It's the non-Jew doing the malacha is as if you were doing the malacha, he was your agent. And although he cannot be your agent at a biblical level, because you can't be an agent to do a transgression, and the truth is that a non-Jew couldn't be an agent in general for other reasons, but on a biblical level, certainly the non-Jew is not going to be your agent to violate Shabbos, but the rabbi said that the non-Jew is going to be your agent to violate Shabbos, therefore you can't have the non-Jew violate Shabbos on your behalf. All right, so those are the three reasons the rabbis give to make this isser. We adopt all three as halacha. However, there will be certain leniencies when not all three, come into play. So to take the standard Amir La'akum case, we're on Shabbos, I need my light turned on. I go up to the non-Jew, please turn on my light. So I have violated all three reasons. My house is now having malacha done, so I might come to turn on a light. I mentioned turning on a light on Shabbos, it was davar davar. And I what do you call it? And I made the non-Jew my agent to do the violation. Okay, that would be your standard case of Amir La'akum. But let's talk about variant cases. What would happen if on Friday I called up a non-Jew? We'll use our delivery case because we'll talk about that a lot later, or a maid, either way. And I go on Friday and I say, can you please deliver this for me on Shabbos? Or I go to the maid and I say on Friday, can you please clean, vacuum my carpet on Shabbos? So when she goes ahead and does the malacha on Shabbos, you have issues 1 and 3 because malacha is being done on Shabbos. So now you may want to come to do malacha. And she is your agent because she's doing the work on Shabbos. But you did not violate number 2 because you never mentioned doing malacha on Shabbos. So if we only held of reasons 1 and 3 and not 2, sorry, the other way around. If we only held of reason 2 and not reasons 1 and 3, it would be permissible to ask a non-Jew on Friday to do something on Shabbos. But it's not, because we adopt all 3 reasons. Similarly, if I went to a non-Jew on Shabbos and I said, can you please pick me up after Shabbos and take me wherever I need to go, to the airport or whatever. So when is the non-Jew going to be doing the malacha? It's going to be after Shabbos. So therefore, according to reasons 1 and 3, you don't have a problem because there's no malacha being done on Shabbos. The malacha is being done after Shabbos. And your shlichus issue, your agency is not an issue because when are they your agent? Only after Shabbos. But after Shabbos, it's okay to drive. But there's a davar davar issue. You mentioned on Shabbos the need to drive after Shabbos. So whereas the standard Amir La'akum is on Shabbos, you ask someone to do a malacha, that's going to be all 3 reasons. Anytime you're asking someone before Shabbos for malacha done on Shabbos, you only have reasons 1 and 3. And anytime you ask on Shabbos for after Shabbos, you only have reason 2. But it's all usher. You can't ask before Shabbos for on Shabbos, you can't ask on Shabbos for Shabbos, and you can't ask for Shabbos for after Shabbos. But as we will see later, there are certain leniencies when you ask on Friday for Shabbos or Shabbos for after Shabbos that you wouldn't have when you're asking Shabbos for Shabbos, and that's because it's not a problem according to all 3 reasons. So that's just, they have that in one's head.
That's not the tricky part. The tricky part is when you have an issue on Shabbos.
Right. Okay,
But
Lemaisa, we will have an idea that there will be some leniency in the Friday to Shabbos and the Shabbos to Motzi Shabbos that you wouldn't have in the other case. But the reason is because you don't have all 3 of the reasons. That would be the underlying idea. Yeah.
So what about if you're not directly asking and like I go to Zeiker's on Friday with clothing. I want it clean. I'm not telling them.
Okay, so we will get to all those examples and how they fit in, but they're all, whenever it comes into being, you're going to have to then fit it back into these reasons. Okay, so just to use this example, the Friday with the Zeikers, so you're not going to have davar davar, so you're allowed to talk to them. The question is going to be, are they doing the malacha, A, where you are going to see the malacha, B, are they your agent to do the malacha? We will see when we go through this, and again, if you there will be a level where you'll learn the halacha, and then there could be the next level where it all that makes sense, why that is true, which say is always a goal, because you'll understand things better and remember them better when you get that. But as we will explain in the cleaner's case, we are going to demonstrate why they are not your agent and why you're not going to come to do malacha because they're working for you. To be in contrast, if Zikers was doing the dry cleaning in your house, it would be different than if they're doing it on their plant. And if Zikers was working for you, meaning you were paying them by the hour, and therefore it can be said that they're your agent, it will be different than if they are hired to get a job done and they're doing it on their time schedule, when we would say they're not your agent, they're working for themselves. So when we get to the leniencies, you'll see how they fit in to the three reasons. Because once we understand what the three reasons are, we can then realize the cases that are lenient is because they don't fit into the three reasons. Or to say it differently, the halacha is going to take these three reasons and find out when they don't apply, and therefore there is no isser. And all of this is easier to be done because it's an isser d'Rabbanan. If you have an isser d'Oraisa, the reasons get left out to a large degree, because whenever you're dealing with an isser d'Oraisa, reasons are all like gravy on top. But when everything's said and done, if it's usser, it's usser. So you're going to have to demonstrate something wasn't usser, no reasons. And you have to demonstrate that's not what the Torah was talking about. But in the case of Amir La'akum, so we understand Chazal made these decrees and they gave us reasons for it. And therefore, those reasons play into how the halacha applies. It's not like, just to be clear, it's not like we say that you can't take medicine nowadays, if you just have a light headache, because in the olden days, they ground up the medicine. We don't do it anymore, but we don't change the d'Rabbanan. That's not what's happening here. Here, when the d'Rabbanan was made initially, it was made with certain rules that don't apply when the underlying purpose of the d'Rabbanan don't apply. It's not that the reason doesn't apply anymore, it never applied. The rabbis never made a problem to ask a non-Jew to do something on Friday when it wouldn't be a shlichus and it wouldn't be something that you would come to violate Shabbos over. That just never was part of the Gzeira. And therefore, we can now today figure out those cases and be lenient. Okay, and that we'll see going forward. Okay, so as of right now, we have established it's an isser d'Rabbanan. There are three reasons. We hold of all three reasons so that it makes no difference whether it's on Shabbos for Shabbos, before Shabbos for Shabbos, Shabbos for after Shabbos. There will be differences in severity. We'll do that later on. And there are leniencies that are built into these reasons. All right, next. Can you tell a non-Jew to do melacha for the non-Jew on Shabbos? In other words, let's say, and this is really a outside case, we'll wait till we get to the main things that are going to affect our day-to-day Shabbos. But you're walking down your block on a walk and you notice your neighbor is out and the grass is high. And you have the relationship with your neighbor. Whether this is a good thing or a bad thing is a different story. But you have the type of relationship where you can tell him, hey, Jim, John, whatever, your grass is really high. I think you should mow your lawn. Now, what just happened? You told a non-Jew to mow his lawn on Shabbos. So one may have thought that that should be prohibited. Why? Certainly not reason 1 or 3. Certainly not 3, because he's not your agent. Even 1, it's not like your world is having malacha done. His world is. And if he went driving, that wouldn't, you can't stop the non-Jews from doing their business. That you're not going to say, we have to stop non-Jews from driving because we may come to drive. That's absurd. So you don't have those. But what about davar davar? What about you mentioned malacha? So halacha makes a fascinating differentiation between the following two cases. If you mention malacha for a non-Jew, but it's with the non-Jew's property, that's considered so removed from the Jew that it's not considered non-Shabbos-dic talk, which means to say, saying the words "mow your lawn" is not a lack of Shabbos-ness. Shabbos-dic is when you say a Jew will mow a lawn. The words "mowing the lawn" is not a Shabbos violation. It's a Jew mowing the lawn, because Goyim can do malacha on Shabbos. So there is no daber daver when it's a guy doing the malacha, because mowing a lawn on the seventh day of the week is not innately a terrible thing. It's a beautiful thing if you're a non-Jew. It's totally fine. It's great. It's only the Jew mowing the lawn that's a problem. So you would be allowed to tell a non-Jew to do malacha on behalf of the non-Jew, meaning for his own good. Again, I can't think of a lot of examples where this would really come up other than this, but in theory, if it would, yes.
I have a real life example.
Okay.
I like to do gardening.
Okay.
And things like that. So sometimes I'll run into somebody who will say, "Oh, I love your property. You know, I was just thinking about planting my own mums," and then they want to get into a whole discussion of, practically speaking, how do the mums do? Or were they from last year? What should I do? And let's just say it's mostly about them and not about my property.
So it's right. You would be able to tell them
Advise them
what to do. And not only would you be able to tell them what to do on Shabbos, but you could tell them what to do on Shabbos, meaning it's not just on Shabbos that you're talking to them, but you could actually tell them to go do it today. Okay, what's the limitation? I find this fascinating because it just shows the connection of things. It can't be with your property. If they're borrowing your, I was going to use the lawnmower, but if they're borrowing your shovel, your tool, you couldn't then tell them to use your trowel to do your own planting. Because it's your property, you can't mention malacha in conjunction with your own property. That already becomes.
My property isn't my tool, or my property is in my yard.
No, the yard, right. The yard, you're just describing what you did. Okay. The point would be is that if I would just, we'll go back to the lawnmower, and then we'll apply. If I would say to the non-Jew, look, your lawn is high. I noticed that you haven't mowed the lawn. He says my lawnmower is broken. So then I say, okay, you can take mine. That would be usher. And even though he's doing it and it is for his benefit, but because it's your property being given to be used on Shabbos, that is not allowed. Now, that being said, if I would lend something to someone for a week, I don't have to spy on him to make sure he doesn't use it on Shabbos. But I could not lend it to him to be used on Shabbos. This probably has connection to the idea that there is a concept of not only are you resting, but your property is resting. And although we don't hold that way in the sense that we can have a fire going on Shabbos and the like, and the halacha allows for our property that was set up before Shabbos to work over Shabbos, so to speak. But in part of the general Isser of Amira, so to mention to a non-Jew to do a malacha using the Jew's property for the non-Jew is still a crossover of daber daber. So when we say the malacha itself is not the violation of not being Shabbos-dic, it's the Jew connected to the malacha, but it's not the Jew doing the malacha, it's the Jew's property being connected. So to say, yeah, you can mow with my lawnmower, right? That wouldn't be okay. Now, it's not just because I'm lending it on Shabbos. Let's say he had borrowed it on Wednesday, and at that point he can mow his lawn whenever he wants. He already has it. You see on Shabbos, and you say, hey, why didn't you mow the lawn already? Now you know that he's using that would not be allowed, because that's essentially telling him to use your lawnmower on Shabbos. And that's what's not allowed. Because although to tell him to use his own lawnmower is okay, but to tell him to use your lawnmower becomes a problem of prohibited Shabbos speech. Yeah.
So is it also an issue of prohibited Shabbos speech if he says, well, I haven't done it because my lawnmower is broken, and you say, okay, you can borrow my lawnmower tomorrow?
You can borrow my lawnmower tomorrow. Yeah, that should be okay. Because I'm just thinking, I mean, you're not even telling him to do anything. I'm trying to think of what would be a comparable thing. I would mow it. Yeah, I would mow it. Sure, you wouldn't say, yeah, that should be okay. Because the whole problem is having him do it or telling him to do it on Shabbos. You're not even telling him to mow at this point. You're telling him to, so I can tell him to mow his lawn on Shabbos with his thing. Then I can also tell him I'll lend you my thing after Shabbos, but I wouldn't want to say, not 100% sure if this is usser, but what you wouldn't want to say if you wanted to get out of the issue is, I'll lend you it tomorrow so you can mow your lawn. Maybe that you wouldn't want to say, because then again, I'm just not sure, because what you're really saying is you'll mow the lawn with my property, but it'll be on after Shabbos. I'm not sure you're really saying something that's wrong, but I'm not 100% sure, because you're still saying to mow the lawn with my property on Shabbos, although the mowing's taking place later. So that I'm not 100% sure. Yeah, good. So I just, your case is more of the neighborly friendly thing. I'll tell you what happened to me personally is there are a handful in the neighborhood of people who, they must be mechanics, but they are mechanics on the side because they don't have a garage. They have their own garage and they have cars parked here, there. And the one I'm thinking of is on Ridgedale, 1 block towards HOC from Miami, on the corner there. It's what street is that? You go, street goes like that. And in any case, there's a corner house there where they actually have a cute little dog, so it's also good. But there's a corner house where there's no question that guy is doing car fixing, because there's 5 cars in various forms of disrepair around, and then he's got something set up there, like a tarp and whatever. So one time I was walking to HOC, he said, he mentioned something, or he said something, friendly comment. So you want to be neighborly, you want to be friendly. So, like I said, it's really amazing how because hell, the guy's working hard. I'm certainly not going to accuse him of not trying to make an honest living. Well, I'm assuming everything's honest, but making an honest living. This guy's working hard. Every time you see him, he's under a car. So I said, it's really nice. You're working hard. You should have, success. Keep on fixing those cars or whatever. So that's okay. But that's only okay because you can mention a malacha if it has nothing to do with you. So go fix those cars. Enjoy. That's great. If he happened to be borrowing your tools, then it would be a problem to say, go fix those cars, because then you'd be telling him that would be the complicated.
18 months too late. When I had my knee surgery last year, I had a therapy machine I had to do not only 7 days a week, but 30 minutes twice a day, 7 days a week.
Okay.
I couldn't possibly do, especially having procedure in June, I couldn't possibly do it twice. Couldn't possibly go from Friday afternoon until, let's say, Shabbos, especially the early Shabbos. Okay, so what would have been I think we set up everything we could before Shabbos. It was set to the right, actually it was not set right. You had to actually crank it up and crank it up. It was really a complicated one. I didn't realize how much, how many things maybe I should have been asking, but it was strictly for medical purposes, no other benefit. Actually, very painful. So it was clearly not.
Where's the non-Jew involved?
So
yeah.
Julie and I took a week. Mr. Murphy took a week. Carrie Jury took a. And I had a rotation of Gentiles for the 6 weeks.
All right. So what did they do? They came in and
they had getting me in the machine was not a big deal. Just arranging the knee and strapping and all that fun stuff. And then the machine had to be turned on and then periodically cranked up for.
Okay.
Actually, one being for an hour twice a day at that time. I forgot. But anyway, the point is that was multiple malachos that were, we plugged it in before Shabbos.
Right, okay, so this we will discuss in terms of when there are leniencies involved, but unless I just want to, I'm missing it, this is not exactly what we're talking about right now.
Okay, fine.
I mean, is that true? I don't want to
It's
be.
definitely like a discussion, I mean, it's a discussion of a Gentile doing a malacha for me on Shabbos.
Right, right now we want to discuss the Gentile doing it for the Gentile.
Right.
Just okay, that's fine. I want to make sure I'm not confusing something.
There you go, that's fine.
Okay,
Yes, it
so
was definitely
for you, okay, so
definitely
we will discuss later on how and what could have and should have been done, and hopefully everything was done okay, but that we'll talk about. Okay, so let's just now introduce the next thing, which will start up, but I don't want to start it because it's really its own thing. The main prohibition is the asking the non-Jew to do the malacha. Okay. The biggest, this is my own assumption, this is not written anywhere, but from what I've experienced, the biggest confusion in the laws of Amira La'akum is the next point. Because you are not allowed to ask the non-Jew, the focus of most people when they approach Amira La'akum is the hinting and how to communicate. Okay, there's a problem though, and that is not the only problem with Amira La'akum, although it is the problem, as Amira La'akum means speaking to a non-Jew. However, Chazal made a secondary gezerah, a secondary decree, which was made to allow the first decree to exist. Meaning as follows: normally the rabbis do not make a decree to protect their own decree. The decrees of the rabbis protect Torah law. The rabbis don't make decrees to protect rabbinical law, because rabbinical law itself is only a protection of Torah law. But when the rabbinical law would never get off the ground if not for the secondary decree, so then we say that the two decrees go hand in hand. You couldn't have one without the other. So the decree that the rabbis made was, not only can you not tell a non-Jew to do malacha on your behalf, but you cannot benefit from a malacha done by a non-Jew. And the reason for that is, if I could benefit from a malacha done by a non-Jew, then the next thing that's going to happen is I'm going to ask the non-Jew to do it for me. Whereas if I couldn't benefit from the work done by the non-Jew, I'm never going to come to ask him to do it, because even if I did ask him to do it, I wouldn't be able to benefit from it anyways. Practically, what this means is, if a non-Jew sees you have an issue, and on their own, at the goodness of their heart, they do something for you without being told. So if you go through our three reasons, none of them are going to apply. It's not going to create the end of Shabbos as we know it, because how many times do we really expect the non-Jew to do something on his own will, sensing you need it? This is not going to transform Shabbos. There's no davar davar. You're not even saying anything. And there's no agency, because you didn't make him your agent. He did it on his own. Nevertheless, now, obviously the act is not usher, because the non-Jew doesn't have the command of Shabbos, but the benefit from the act becomes usher. So, for example, if we're talking about turning on a light, if the non-Jew would see you sitting in a room that was dark, now the level of darkness and what you're doing in that room is going to make a difference down the road. We're just using this as the example. The non-Jew sees you sitting in a dark room with a book. He realizes that you are struggling and therefore turns on the light. Okay, or to take I guess even a simpler case, you have a non-Jew who is in the vicinity, let's say they're in your house, they're in here, whatever, and they notice that someone accidentally turned off the bathroom light. They have no interest in using the bathroom, at least not right now. They just realize that it's inconvenient for the Jews to have the light off, and they flick the light on. That would not violate any of the three issues. Nevertheless, it is prohibited to benefit from that action, because if I would benefit from that, then the very next thing I'd be tempted to do when the light was off is ask them to do it.